Welcome, everyone. It is yet another episode of the ERG Movement Podcast, where we bring some awesome people on here to talk about the awesome things that are going on in the ERG space and just who have had really good experience in the ERG space in general. And today is no exception to that. We have Ruth here who's going to talk. Actually, I'm going to give you a chance to intro yourself, Ruth. Tell us about you and how you got into the ERG space.
Yeah. So I love this story. So I love that this is the first question you're asking me. So before I start with like she, her, hers pronouns, I stumbled into the DEI space. I was in a place where I looked around and I did not see people who look like me. I was like, okay, we're all black and brown people. I don't see a lot here. And so I didn't feel that sense of inclusion and belonging. And so I was like, okay, it's not here. Someone's gotta create it. So it was literally me raising my hand saying, hey, this is important. Can we do something here? Talking to a lot of different leaders as part of my individual development conversation and kind of getting it across saying, like, this is really something I want to work on. And so there was this idea that sparked, and at some point they were like, you know what, you're right. We should have some sort of DEI presence within this organization. They came to me and they were like, you keep talking about this. Is this something you want to pursue? And I was like, yes. And they were kind of like, okay, we don't have a job description. We don't know exactly what this will look like. But if you're interested, like, let's do it. And so that's kind of how I stumbled into it. And ERGs has been a piece of it. It's something that I'm so passionate about. My full-time role right now is completely dedicated to the ERG space. And so, yeah, I've learned a lot along the way and I'm happy to share.
Yeah, I'm curious. So you weren't in the ERG space when you said, let's start it here. What were you doing before? Yeah, what were you doing before you were in the ERG space?
Yeah, I mean, so my background is still in HR, but it was very targeted. So I did a lot of work in performance management, goal setting, succession planning. So a lot of like process oriented HR work, and DEI was always a part of it. So like what does our succession planning look like? Who's not on succession plans? Like let's take that one step level further to make sure there isn't any type of bias in these processes. So it was always part of what I was doing, but I just wanted to make it a little bit more formalized.
See, it seems like you are the perfect person to be doing ERG work then, because all that stuff definitely pops up in the ERG space from performance and succession planning, even like that's something that comes up a lot. So
Totally.
interesting. So you founded an ERG at the company that you were at then.
So it had generally started before me, but I think it was like a year in deep, and then I kind of just dove forward with it.
Got you. And what year roughly would you say that was?
Oh my gosh, what year is it? I'm like, what year is it now? Must have been like 2017, 2018,
Got-
2018.
Okay, things have changed.
Yes.
I mean, from a lot of things. I would love to hear what the ERG experience was like from your perspective pre-pandemic. What were some things that were coming out of ERGs? Like what got people going? Just all the things there.
Yeah, I think pre-pandemic, we really enjoyed just being in the room together. Like there were meetings that I would show up with all my ERG leaders. I wouldn't say a thing. I would just walk in, help kind of facilitate certain things, but I would let the energy just bounce off the walls. And I thought it was like very engaging and exciting. But I would also say a lot of the conversation was around like inclusion and belonging, especially in the beginning stages of an ERG. I think like building a community in the beginning is really important. But then for us, like as we gradually grew, we really focused on like strategic initiatives and like thought about like how can we actually provide innovative solutions to the organization. And so that's kind of how the journey has been with the ERG. Pre-pandemic, it's definitely different than how we approached our ERGs during the pandemic and afterwards. I feel like I've learned so much after the pandemic now that we have this hybrid space.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue then, because how was it moving from that where you can feel the energy, being in a room with other people to now it's all virtual. How was that pivot and what were some learnings that came out of that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say pre-pandemic, now looking back, I was in the room, so I felt like I had a voice. I felt like I had space. But
Mhm.
I think back to people who weren't in the room, people who were dialing in, I don't think we were as inclusive as we should have been, especially being under diversity, equity, inclusion. We want to create spaces for everyone. And so I feel like one really good learning post pandemic is how to create those inclusive spaces in hybrid environments. It was something that I don't
Mhm.
really think we give a lot of thought to. And now I intentionally think about getting those voices in the room. I think especially now with hybrid environments, like our reach is just so much further. Like I can have meetings with our global co-chairs, our global chapter leads. We can have events where we're catering to everyone and we think about the timing and we're just able to just have a larger reach, which is something I really like and we're very intentional about it as well.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. That being said, even still in the virtual space for companies who maybe are remote first, were there any like virtual engagements that you really liked or that you feel like went over really well?
Yeah. So for me, from the perspective of someone who manages the ERG program as a whole, one thing that I felt was missing when we went to completely remote is just that sense of connection. And so one thing I did from like a program perspective is I made sure that there were connection points
Mm,
across the ERG leaders. I felt like they were working in a silo. So for example, we use this thing called the 4C model created by Dr. Robert Rodriguez. The 4C's are culture, commerce, career, and community. It all talks about the impact that you have as an ERG when it comes to those four separate buckets. But the way that we're structured is we had a lead for each one of those 4C's as well. And so what I was finding is there was a lot of similar things happening in silos with different ERGs. And so I was like, let's just come together and touch base at least on a quarterly basis. So all the leads for culture can come and talk about what you're doing. All leads for commerce can come and talk about what you're working on. So we've finally started seeing more synergy and partnerships across the different ERGs. And that was something that we were missing. We were doing some of that in person, but then when we were fully remote, it just wasn't happening. And so I had to be intentional in saying, let's come together, let's talk about it. So we did that within our organization, but then also much broader. We found another organization also followed the 4C model. And so we would have them come and we would share best practices, just focused
mhm.
on culture, just focused on career and commerce. And I think that was really helpful, especially in a virtual space.
You said so many good points there because one, if you're going to collaborate with the other ERG leaders, there has to be that consistency across the ERGs on what structure they're following. So, was that something that you implemented or was it something that was already pre-existing? If you did help to implement it, the question will be, how did you like kind of introduce that new train of thought to the ERG leaders?
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember if it was something that I implemented. I don't remember. Oh, I know it was part of the early stages, so I can safely say that. I just think structure is so important for ERGs. I think they can easily be turned into groups that are just focused on inclusion and belonging. And while that is so important, I think it's really important to make sure that we can use ERGs in other ways as well to develop talent, to be partners for the business, to partner with the community. So for us, I think the structure was really important and it was a place that we started. The second piece that was really important is beyond structure. Let's talk about ROI, return on investment. Like let's talk about metrics. Like what are we actually doing in this space? And again, like the great thing about the 4C model with Dr. Robert Rodriguez is there's a whole survey that they have in place that you send to all your ERG members where you're able to answer questions that say, okay, how are you doing when it comes to these 4Cs? And you're able to get really good feedback that helps you intentionally plan your year and helps you intentionally think about like, okay, what am I doing this year versus like, what am I focused on for the next, 5 years? And I think the structure is really important. And also that feedback and like survey mechanism is really important. You don't need to follow the 4Cs. There's so many other structures you can follow. I mean, you don't have to use the 4C survey, but I think having structure, whatever that looks like, is important. And having like some sort of survey methodology to get feedback is important too.
Yeah, that's big because a lot of people I feel like they don't even have that structure that they're relying on. And when you don't have that, you don't have something that you're basing your program around or even success around. Yeah, that's an interesting point. That being said, I'm curious too what success looks like to you
Mm,
for an
mm.
ERG program, for ERG leaders, but also just for like the program in general.
Yeah, so for me, it always comes back to ROI. Like, what metrics can we tie into this ERG program that really so a couple of things you can look for, or are high potential leaders stepping into these ERG leadership roles? Are these roles coveted? Do people and this is how I can tell. Are you calling it an ERG leadership position or are you calling it a volunteer position? Because there's a difference, there's a distinction. And when you're calling it a volunteer position, when people within the organization call it a volunteer position, it's because it's seen in a different light than an ERG leadership position. And it's
Mhm,
something that unintentionally comes up, but you notice those things. Like a leadership position is one where it's sought after, it's
mhm,
important. It could be tied to, a succession plan. So our high potential leaders are the ones that are stepping into this role. And there's high visibility. You feel like you're actually making a difference and you're connecting with leaders. And so I just feel like there's a difference there. I don't know if that's answering your question. I feel like I might have gone on a little bit of a tangent.
I like where you went with it though, because even how you market the position to people is big. And it's important as program managers that we like watch that language as well. So that being said, I'm curious too, when it comes time to get new ERG leaders in place, is it difficult or even then, like what's the process that you kind of follow to make people want to join?
Yeah, I mean it's not always easy. I mean, gotta remember this is something people do on top of their jobs. It's sometimes like a passion project. And so it's not easy. And sometimes like the visibility isn't there. There isn't return on development or whatever that people want from these roles sometimes. If it's not done well, it's not there. And so I also feel like it's a little bit of a journey. For me, I feel like there needs to be more than someone just raising their hand saying, hey, I volunteer because I'm interested in this. I think there needs to be some sort of application, vetting process, and then for really highly visible roles for, a position like global co-chair, for example, there needs to be some sort of interview process. That's how I feel. I think even if you don't do that, having some sort of nomination process where, your senior executive leaders are coming to you and telling you, okay, I think this person would be really good to lead an ERG. I think that's even good. But I think the whole, like, "Let me just kind of sort of volunteer," I don't feel like that always works.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen where that can be a rough partnership moving forward after that. If you had to say that there was one question to ask potential new ERG leaders, what would you say is the most important question to kind of determine if they're a good fit for the role?
So for me, I always start with, like, what is your why?
Mm,
That is where I start because I wanna know why you're doing what you're doing. I think another really good question is so a lot of times the prerequisite to join as an ERG leader is being a part of the ERG
mm,
or, having another role and then just kind of elevating to a more senior level role. And so a lot of times I'll ask the question, like, where are some areas of opportunity? You've been a member here or you've been a previous leader, like what can you bring to the table? Why are you interested in serving? Like where could we go from here? I feel like base level we've done some work, but where's the future for us? Like what do you see?
that's huge. I love that. Another question too, coming out of that. Well, okay, we'll go with this one. So you have the ERG leader in their role. What is your take on how long they should stay in the role?
That's a good question. So I have my own theory. Just seeing leaders staying in their role and sometimes get a sense of burnout or there's a certain point where I feel like the passion is waning or there's different points where I just feel like they may need a break. What I've seen in general is I think 2 years. I think you need at least 1 year to ramp up and really understand what you're doing. And then that second year is really when you feel like, okay, like now I know what I'm doing. Let me focus on making impact. Um, I mean, That being said, I do think there's some ERG leaders that may say, hey, I actually really want to stay on for a little bit longer. And I feel like I can be flexible there. But for me, I feel like that 2 year mark is where I'm really looking at my ERG leaders to say, like, how are you doing? Are we okay? Do you feel a sense of burnout? Like, is your wellness? And that's where we revisit that conversation.
I think it's no coincidence that everyone I ask this question to always says 2 years. And I did not
Really?
prep you on that in advance, just for the
Wow.
record. You said
That's
the
good to
exact
know.
answer. Yep. Which is, I agree completely. I feel like that's a good amount of time and it's not too long of a commitment either.
Yeah.
Like if there's no end in sight, that might burn someone out. And if
Oh,
it's,
totally. Totally.
what are some other things that maybe you've seen or even just like lessons you've learned around avoiding ERG leader burnout?
Ooh, okay. I got a hot take. So for me, administrative burden is huge. It's huge. When you're a leader dedicating time out of your busy schedule on top of everything you're doing to lead an ERG, I want to take as much administrative burden away from you as possible. And now
Mm,
we have systems in place that can just make things a little bit easier. And so one of the things that I'm always looking at is like, what are those tools and resources? So something that I've been looking at is like different ERG platforms. There are platforms that just take away that administrative burden. So there's easily built templates. If you want to send a newsletter, you don't have to think about what it looks like. You just go in, you drop in the words, what you want to say, hit send, and it's quick, right? You don't want to think of how do I track the amount of events I have, how do I track the RSVPs, how like, what is the click rates on the communications I'm sending out? And there are tools in place that
mhm.
have this already. So like, well, let's take the burden away and let's make things automated where we can. And so that's something I'm super passionate about because I just want to make it easier so we can go back to like impact because that's where I want to focus on. I don't want to focus on the administrative tasks that take away from impact.
Right. Taking away those things, especially, I mean, it can be tedious and that can really be the things like, I just don't want to do this type of things. Okay. Brought up an interesting topic.
Yeah.
With when it comes to these tools, what do you look for when you look for one that you want to bring on to your organization? What are some considerations?
Yeah, so I think a couple are it needs to be something that can connect easily with whatever systems we already have in place with the organization. Does it is there integration with Workday? Is there integration with, I don't know, Microsoft Teams? Like what do we already have in place that we need to find connection points to? Because the last thing I want to do is say, hey, you gotta update this thing in the platform, you gotta update this thing Workday, you gotta update it in like all these other I don't want to like add to the work that you're doing. So integration is key from just like a tech standpoint. I think the other piece of it, keep going back to data, but data. Like what data can we get from this platform? So I mean, there's some organizations where people just click sign up, they sign up for the ERG, and you have thousands of people that are part of an ERG. But what does that really tell you? Like, are these people just getting newsletters and that's kind of it? Are they attending events? Are they a part of mentorship? Like, what does engagement look like?
Mhm.
And, these platforms that we have in place, they can tell you, like, engagement looks like someone goes to 3 events out of a year. Okay, so, like, out of the thousands of people that are part of the ERG, how many people are at least making it to 3 events? Okay, that's what we think is engaged, and we're able to start getting those, like, nitty-gritty details of impactful data.
That's big too. Engagement is definitely a big word in the ERG
Yeah.
space.
Wow.
Without data, it can just be a concept. Like, what does engagement really mean? For you, from what you've seen, when it comes to like percentages, maybe in terms of engagement, what do you think is like healthy engagement within an ERG?
Mm.
And
Mm.
as a second question, how can an ERG help to boost their ERG engagement?
Mm, I think that's a really good question. I think especially now in a hybrid environment, engagement looks different. It could be um, click rate of a communication, click rate of a training session. Like that could be a piece of engagement. It
Mm,
could be, going to events, physically going or virtually attending. I mean, I think it's different depending on, where you're located and even how you want to engage. Some people may not want to talk to other people. Some people may want to read things, may want attend just the training or virtual training. And so I think engagement looks a little bit different, but I think, yeah, just being able to kind of look at it from a broad perspective is important. And being able to kind of gather those different data pieces is important because it is hard to say like, okay, people attended events. Is that just our black a blanket statement for them being engaged? I do think click rate for communication is important. Why are you setting up communications if only two people are clicking it?
Mhm.
It's important. And sorry, what was your second part of that question?
How to boost engagement.
Boost engagement. That's a really good one. That's a really good one, and I think especially for new ERGs, getting your name out there. Like, I think the foundation is building the community, and so, having quality programming where people can just connect. I think that's really important, and then I also think having ERG leaders that are visible and open to having conversations and connecting, I think that's really important as well.
Definitely. I'm big on community building as a foundation because you can't make the change without the people who are going to make the change. Movement needs people. So,
Exactly. And that I feel like that trust building piece is really important. I always say that our ERG leaders are like a part of the DEI team. They're just an extension because whatever we're doing, we're talking about our goals or strategy, they should be cascading it down to their members and the people that they interact with. And so they need that sense of trust built in because a lot of times your members are going to come to them with questions because they
mhm,
see them as an extension. And so that trust, I think, is really important.
I agree. I agree completely. Now, there's something that you just mentioned. Oh, so you were mentioning, for instance, people might be sending out communications and it may only have it might have a really low click rate. But a lot of ERGs, they continue to do these things even though it may not necessarily be what's best, or even, I mean, times change. ERGs have now been around for over 50 years. What are some other examples of maybe like outdated practices that ERGs might be holding on to, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I think communication, I think the way you structure your communication is important. Like we are in the generation of like Instagram. I just want like a short tidbit of like what is happening. And so I think that's really important. I think long-winded communications can sometimes get lost. And I also using things like, group chat or like your Teams channel or things like that that are a little bit more dynamic to get people's voices in that space is really important. So sometimes, you can add something in whatever Teams channel you have, asking a question, just asking for engagement. And I think that really goes a long way. I know we talked about ERG platform. Some platforms, they have an application. They have an app that goes with the platform. And so if you wanted to quickly just, run through the app, see, what events are happening, attend the events virtually over your phone, like things like that just make it a little bit more dynamic. And I think that's where we need to be. It needs to be fun.
I agree completely. So I'm curious too, with you being in the space for some time, you've seen different types of events and things like that. Is there one that stands out that you feel like really hit home when it comes to that community building and that piece there?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I think I'm like thinking about there's so many amazing events, but my favorite by far is anything where you're just really able to connect. So we did an event that was the speed networking event,
Mm,
and it was just so much fun because you're going from table to table, you're meeting all these different people, all these different levels, from different parts of the organization. It was like fun, dynamic. I think at each table we had like questions, like fun questions that you can ask. And like that was so much fun. Like I love having events like that. And then I also think um I think new hire engagement is really important. So one of the things that I've done in the past is added G leaders to whatever like onboarding sessions we have for the organization. So at a company, we used to do onboarding, and then at the end of the day, it was like almost like a happy hour type thing. But I would invite all of my ERG leaders that were physically located in that location to come. Like you don't have to have speaking points or talking points in place. You don't have to present. Just come, you get like a free dinner, and you can like really connect with people face to face. And I feel like that sense of inclusion and belonging, especially for new hires, is so key. It's so important. And so, yeah, I just feel like that also is really impactful.
Yeah, and I love how you just mentioned how they don't have to like have talking points and things like that. Cause I feel like a lot of ERGs are leaning into this, everything has to be perfect and polished
Yeah.
currently when it comes to events and things like that. Well, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I get it, right? We want it to be perfect. We want it to be polished. We have a lot of senior leaders that we want to attend. So, do as much as you can to make things as good as they can be, but also don't put so much pressure on yourself. Give yourself grace in this space. This is something you're doing above and beyond your actual job. So give yourself grace. I think that first and foremost is important. The second piece is like show up authentically. You don't always need to have talking points. Share your true authentic self because I think that's what people will really connect with.
I agree. And so you gave an answer for an event that was in person.
Yeah.
Once again, for the remote first folks, what are some of the or what's an event that really sticks out to you that kind of made that impact? And maybe it's more than just community building, but just in general, what's something that sticks out to you?
I guess I just really love community building because my example is again community building. We had this event with one of our ERGs that was, and it was during the pandemic. So I think we all really needed this, where we created our own little mentorship circles. And so, we filled out some sort of survey, talked about some things that are top of mind for us. They connected us with 2 or 3 different people across the organization, across the globe. And we met, I don't know if it was like once every other week, but there was a regular cadence where we would meet and we just talk and we would just spend time talking about things that were happening in our personal life, things that we were focused on at work, things that we needed encouragement on, advice on. It was really amazing just to have that set of people there that I felt like had my back. I remember there was one person who really wanted advice on, applying for another internal role. And so, we would talk about the interview process. We would practice interviewing, like gave each other real feedback. And it wasn't so strict. It wasn't like, oh, you have to show up. It was like, show up if you can. If you can't, we get it. But I think having that sense of community in a time where we were all remote during the pandemic, it just felt comforting. And I think that's why it was so impactful for me on a personal level.
I love that. Okay. When it comes to events, now you just mentioned, ironically, two of your favorite events were not some of the events that I think a lot of ERGs default to, like speakers and
Yeah.
things. What is your take when it comes to bringing speakers in to talk to ERGs?
I love speakers. I love speakers. I'm someone who has helped manage speakers and have large events virtually and in person. So I understand the need for speakers and I think they can really engaging and motivating and inspirational. I think for me is what are our concrete steps to really make it personal, to add that self-reflection piece to it? Like, could we do the speaker and then do a smaller like group discussion where we talk about, our thoughts around what was said, how it's impacted us? Is there any type of like a worksheet that we could fill out beforehand that will help us guide the conversation and think through personalizing what's being said? Is there some sort of homework that we can do? Like, I think that engagement piece is really important. Is there like a breakout session in between? Like, that I feel like that engagement piece is really important and sometimes something that's missing. I feel like a lot of times organizations may have a speaker and then maybe there's like a part two. Maybe there's a part two where you personalize it and you talk about it. But I feel like if you really want key learnings, key takeaways that are impactful for your life, really make a difference, that engagement piece is so important.
That's huge because that's really how you can get the most out of these speaker sessions, especially where some companies are spending a ton of money on speakers. But how do you really maximize bringing this person in? Is it just a 1 hour thing where they're talking at people and they're not engaged?
Mm.
I love that. Now, when it comes to the selection of speakers, because I don't know about you, but at least for me, I've experienced some hit and miss activities for sure. What are your tips for like speaker vetting or, when you go to select speakers or when ERG leaders go to select speakers to bring inside of the organization?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a big conversation, a conversation that I have a lot of times. I think for me, as many voices in the room as possible, especially in the early stage, is really important. Like, what do you think will be impactful for this population? What are things that are coming up in your conversations with your ERG members?
Right.
From a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective, like, what are we doing in this space to elevate and amplify the voices of this community? I think there needs to be a bunch of different stakeholders to help us think through, what is the theme? Like, what type of content do we want to talk about? And then from there, like, who is the right fit? I think having an intersectional lens is really important. I think people who can talk about their perspective is really important from an authentic that are willing to engage in two-way dialogue is
Mhm.
important. So I think there's a lot of things to consider.
Those are some good ones for sure. I hope that everyone who's listening really took those notes down as well. Even just the different formats on how they can engage. It doesn't just have to be the one presentation style type of way.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
What about for some maybe like non-live ways how you can still engage members? What are some things that you've seen or that have gone really well in your opinion?
I think having some sort of Q&A portion is really good, having breakout rooms can be really good, or using a platform like Kahoot, for example, or like having some sort of interactive component to your presentation. I think that's always just a really good way to get people more engaged. And if that's not part of it, again, you can have a two-part conversation. Like maybe the session isn't engaging, maybe it doesn't have those components, but then, like, as an ERT, you can kinda take it away and you can kinda debrief and bring those engaging elements into that speaker session, especially if that session was recorded, you can always, send that out to your members, "Listen to the recording, come, let's talk, let's engage."
How about outside of events? What are some other things outside of events, outside of communications, like just, yeah, what are some other things that ERG leaders can do to help engage their members? Because, like you mentioned, they might not want to talk to other people or hop on a call, and maybe they don't interact in the channel. But what are some other things that can be done to get them involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think ERG leaders can really partner with parts of the organization to help provide innovative solutions. So maybe you're part of, parents ERG and you want to provide feedback on benefits that we have available to parents. I mean, I think that's a conversation you can have with HR or think about having some sort of focus group. And of course, you'll need to partner with HR. I think your voice could be used in that space to make the organization more inclusive. If you have an organization that has marketing campaigns or products. Okay, maybe there's a way for us to have some sort of focus group to make sure that whatever marketing campaigns we have in place, whatever products we have in place, we really have an inclusive lens when we're looking at it. And I think that's where ERGs can play a really pivotal role in making sure that their lens, their view it is a part of those discussions. And you don't have to sit in product, you don't have to sit in marketing, you don't have to be on the HR team to provide your personal perspective on things such as benefits, product, marketing, consumer insights. There's so many different ways to partner and get your voice out there.
Volunteerism also comes up a lot in the ERG
Yeah.
space. What are some success stories that you've seen when it comes to that?
Yes, yes. I think volunteering is so important. Being part of the community in which you live, work, you reside. I think it's really important. And I think if there is a tie between what your organization does and how you can uplift the community, I think that's even better. I was part of an organization where financial education is really important. And so for us, when we're thinking about community service opportunities, like could we uplift our community by bringing financial education sessions to the community to
Mhm.
uplift the community? And so, you're doing something really good for the organization, but you're also doing something really good for the community. And there's that like alignment between the goals of the organization, ERG, and uplifting the community.
That's big. That's big. Tying it, and there's ways with every business. I feel like I haven't encountered a business yet where there isn't a way to tie it back to how can we help like bring this business to underrepresented communities or talk
Yes.
to, talk to them more so about how to utilize even what we do.
Oh, totally, totally. Like even having I don't know, like volunteering at schools where you come and you talk about the work that you're doing. Um, I mean, black and brown kids may not know that there is a pathway when it comes to creating sneakers or creating shoes and athletic apparel. So, like,
Mhm.
okay, maybe there's an opportunity to come there and show them what you're working on. There's so many different ways to get involved. And I know it's just another example, but there are a lot of ways to get involved and have it tie back to the goals of your organization and the goals of your ERG.
That's big. That's big. Okay. I'm curious then, because well, we're definitely gonna have to have you back for a part two because I have a ton of questions if I'm being honest. For the next like two, maybe three questions,
Yeah.
focus on your experience as a program manager. So leading ERG programs globally at that,
Mhm.
even at some big organizations. I mean, leading ERGs globally is different for sure.
Different. Yeah.
How do you unite the efforts of people across different regions where maybe there's different norms, cultural norms, kind of relationships with D&I as a whole? Curious how that plays a factor in your role.
Yeah, yeah. You are out here like asking the hard hitting questions today. So this is a tough one and something that I have not resolved. So I will be very honest with you there. I think it's a work in progress. I can tell you how I think it should work and what I would like to see. I think for me, there always needs to be some sort of like ladder up approach. So ERGs as a whole, their goals always need to ladder up into, the global diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. And then I think same with the regions. I think the region diversity, equity, inclusion strategy needs to ladder up into some sort of global diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Of course, there's going to be cultural nuances, but there needs to be alignment at all 3 different levels.
Mhm,
I think for the ERGs, similarly, I think for each ERG, there should be structure in place where um, they have goals for the global ERG, but then the way that you go about hitting those goals for the different chapters, for the different regions, they may be different. So, for example, an organization may say, okay, our diversity, equity, and inclusion goal is focused on women at the, I don't know, mid-level career level. Like that's the global goal. What that looks like for the ERG may be different than how it is executed within the different chapters, within the different regions, because there are cultural nuances. But the goal still stays the same. The
mhm.
approach may vary because of those nuances.
Yep. That makes perfect sense too. Man, I have two questions. Even though we kind of touched on events, I'm also curious, what are some events outside of the US that you've
Mm.
also seen that have been impactful? Just because a lot of the time people get feedback that their ERG programs are US centric. So what are some non-US centric programming examples that you've seen?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think whenever you can have events that are catered specifically to that region, I think that is always a winner. I don't think we should take a North America centric event and say, okay, well, Asia Pacific, I know it's not a great time for you, but just show up anyway and just like have this blanket approach for all of your ERG chapters. I don't think that's gonna work. I think there are different ways you could approach it. So like maybe you have the same speaker, but because you know that you have a global chapters, maybe you have that speaker come at all the different times that matches your regional chapters. That's one way to kind of adapt that. So it's the same conversation, it's the same speaker, but at least in the timings you're adapting it to say, okay, we are a global ERG, and this is one way that we show that we are.
Mhm.
But I also think for the different regions, having region specific events, I think is really good. And saying, hey, North America, like, please attend. I think it would be good for us to start having that global mindset and learning from, regional chapters, especially outside of North America, because I think you're so right. We can be so US and North America centric when a lot of these programs are really global.
Hmm. Hmm. And with chapters, I know that those can be fun in a global organization too, where it almost feels like everyone's doing their own thing at their own speed. What are some tips for people who have incorporated in their program and how to best at least know what's going on, with all the different ones?
Yeah. I mean, I think being able to have regular touch bases is really important. And again, right, this sounds so simple, but like time makes a difference. So, like, if you have a global chapter, make sure you're having multiple touch bases so people actually have the ability to join. So, it's not just North America centric. And then also make sure that you're recording the sessions and you're following up, you're sending out the recording, you're also, in email talking about what the follow-up looks like. Like those sort of things help these chapter leads feel like they are included and it makes them feel like they're part of the journey. So yeah, I think just having an inclusive mindset and adapting it for the different chapters and regions is really important.
And that's big. And I'm definitely listening to you on this one because just for context for everyone's listening, there's a big difference between someone like me with a ERG leader team of less than 100 versus hundreds of ERG leaders. That is a completely
Yes.
small game.
Yes, and I want everyone who maybe, listening, I do not have it figured out, especially my ERG leaders who are like, but it is a journey, and it's a journey that I want to go on with my ERG leaders because we can make things better. I know what I want it to look like, and I have the best partners. It's a journey, like what I've said to my ERG leaders, give yourself grace. Even for us, as program managers, we need to give ourselves grace because it is a lot of work and it takes passion, drive, and patience, quite honestly.
Hmm. Okay, I think that that's a great segue to that closing question. How do you keep that passion and drive? Because for instance, I saw a TikTok recently that was just basically talking about it's one thing to be passionate about it, but sometimes when there's like now money assigned to it and it becomes our everyday role, we lose that love for it. So how do you keep that passion just doing the work that you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And if I'm being honest, I don't always feel the passion. There are times where I'm bogged down and I don't always feel 100%. And in moments like that, I try to step back and think about my why. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, why did I decide to join DEI back in the day, back in 2017, 2018, when I created this role? Like, what was my why? I think that bigger picture always helps ground me. And then the other piece of it is like, I really love our ERG leaders. Like, they inspire me. There are some amazing leaders out there who go above and beyond and put in their hard work, dedication to really make a difference within our organizations. And I'm like, okay, that person's doing it. This person's doing it. Like, I got to show up. I have to show up because they are my motivating factor, and the difference that they're making motivates me.
I love that. Okay, actual real last question this time. Because even with the ERG movement, we're all about forward movement of ERGs 2.0, doing them better. 10 years down the line, what would you like to see happening more in the ERG space or maybe just in general in the ERG space that's not happening as much or at all right now?
Mm. Oh my gosh, such a good question. Such a good question. Okay, I mean, and this is actually my view on like diversity, equity, and inclusion in general, but I want to see it more embedded within the organization. Like, I don't want to see ERGs or diversity, equity. Like, I don't want to see it separate. I want us to be partners. I
Mm.
want us to be invited to the table. I want us to have a seat. I want, when people are thinking about initiatives, they're like, all right, it's part of the plan. It's like, okay, let's get our ERG leaders involved. Let's get their thoughts. Like they're part of the conversation as we're rolling out things for the organization. We're embedded within the organization. Like, That's where I think I would want to see us in the future. We're not separate. We're not doing our own thing. We're with the organization. We're partners in this work. So yeah, that's what I'd love to see.
You're speaking my language. Honestly, that is the perfect way to close this. When I tell you, I'm so grateful for you being here today. Let everyone know how they can find you, or yeah, where they
Yeah,
can
yeah.
connect with you.
So you can find me on LinkedIn. My first name is Ruth, Ruth. Last name is Light, Lite. Search me on LinkedIn, follow me, add me, and I will follow you back. I love talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. It is my passion. I love talking about all things related to ERGs. Like I said, it is a work in progress. So if you have best practices, I am all ears, happy to share things that I've learned along the way as well. So please connect with me.
Amazing, amazing. Ruth's information will be down below in the description box. Definitely connect with her. Once again, thank you so much. This has been an incredible episode, and we look forward to having you back for sure.